another kartal. Hare Krishna. I think this one's broken. Yeah, this one's broken. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodananda Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivijakacarya Ashtotra Sada Sri Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada Ki Granthraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Ki Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayed Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistikhi. Today we are reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 1, entitled The History of the Life of Ajamila, text 49. Yatagnyas tamasa yukta upaste vyaktam eva hi naveda purvam aparam nashta janma smitistata yatagnyas tamasa yukta upaste vyaktameva hi naveda purvam aparam nashta janma smitistata yatagnyas tamasa yukta upaste vyaktameva hi naveda purvam aparam nashta janma smitistata. Yatagnyas tamasa yukta upaste vyaktameva hi naveda purvam aparam nashta janma smitistata. Matajis. Yatagnyas tamasa yukta janma smitistata yatagnyas tamasa yukta upaste vyaktameva hi naveda purvam aparam nashta janma smitistata. Word to word meaning. Yata, just as Ajna, an ignorant living being, tamasa, in sleep, yuktaha, engaged, upaste, acts according to, vyaktam, a body manifested in a dream, eva, certainly, he, indeed, naveda, does not know, purvam, the past body, aparam, the next body, nashta, lost, janma smritihi, the remembrance of birth, tata, similarly. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Translation. As a sleeping person acts according to the body manifested in his dreams and accepts it to be himself, so one identifies with his present body, which he acquired because of his past religious or irreligious actions, and is unable to know his past or future lives. Translation responsively. As a sleeping person acts according to the body manifested in his dreams and accepts it to be himself, so one identifies with his present body, which he acquired because of his past religious or irreligious actions, and is unable to know his past or future lives. Purport. A man engages in sinful activities because he does not know what he did in his past life to get his present materially conditioned body, which is subjected to the threefold miseries. As stated by Rishabhadeva in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam 5.5.4, Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma. A human being who is mad after sense gratification does not hesitate to act sinfully. Yad indriya pritya apnoti. He performs sinful actions simply for sense gratification. Na sadhu manye. This is not good. Yata atmano yam asan apikleshada asa dehaha. Because of such sinful actions, one receives another body in which to suffer as he is suffering in his present body because of his past sinful activities. It should be understood that a person who does not have Vedic knowledge always acts in ignorance of what he has done in the past, what he is doing at the present, and how he will suffer in the future. It's too loud, can you reduce the volume? He is completely in darkness. Therefore, the Vedic injunction is tamasi ma, don't remain in darkness. Jyotirgama, try to go to the light. The light or illumination is Vedic knowledge, which one can understand when he is elevated to the mode of goodness or when he transcends the mode of goodness by engaging in devotional service to the spiritual master and the Supreme Lord. This is described in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.23. Yasya deve para bhaktir yata deve tata guru tasyaite katitahi artha prakashante mahatmanaha. Unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. The Vedas enjoin tat vignartam sagurum eva bigachet. One must approach a spiritual master who has full knowledge of the Vedas and be faithfully directed by him in order to become a devotee of the Lord. Then the knowledge of the Vedas will be revealed. When the Vedic knowledge is revealed, one need no longer remain in the darkness of material nature. According to his association with the material modes of nature, goodness, passion and ignorance, a living entity gets a particular type of body. The example of one who associates with the mode of goodness is a qualified Brahmana. Such a Brahmana knows past, present and future because he consults the Vedic literature and sees through the eyes of Shastra, Shastra Chakshusha. He can understand what his past life was, why he is in the present body, and how he can obtain liberation from the clutches of Maya and not accept another material body. This is all possible when one is situated in the mode of goodness. Generally, however, the living entities are engrossed in the modes of passion and ignorance. In any case, one receives an inferior or superior body at the discretion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma. As stated in the previous verse, Manasaiva Pure Devaha Purva Rupam Vipashyati Anumi Mam Sate Apurvam Manasa Bhagavan Ajaha. Everything depends on Bhagavan or Aja, the unborn. Why doesn't one please Bhagavan to receive a better body? The answer is Ajñas Tamasa, because of gross ignorance. One who is in complete darkness cannot know what his past life was or what his next life will be. He is simply interested in his present body. Even though he has a human body, a person in the mode of ignorance and interested only in his present body is like an animal. For an animal, being covered by ignorance, thinks that the ultimate goal of life and happiness is to eat as much as possible. A human being must be educated to understand his past life and how he can endeavor for a better life in the future. There is even a book called Brihu Samhita, which reveals information about one's past, present, and future lives according to astrological calculations. Somehow or other, one must be enlightened about his past, present, and future. One who is interested only in his present body and who tries to enjoy his senses to the fullest extent is understood to be engrossed in the mode of ignorance. His future is very, very dark. Indeed, the future is always dark for one who is grossly covered by ignorance. Especially in this age, human society is covered by the mode of ignorance, and therefore everyone thinks his present body to be everything without consideration of the past or future. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are hearing the Yamaduta Vishnuduta Samvad, the conversation between the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas. The Yamadutas started speaking almost from verse 40 onwards. When the Vishnudutas were surprised as to how the Yamadutas did not know the code of Dharma, what they are standing for, who they are representing. That's one side of the surprise. The other side of the surprise is Yamadutas were surprised. How could such a sinful person like Ajamila not be punished? Because they got a list of the sinful reactions that sinful actions and the subsequent reactions that he is going to face. He is sure candidate for punishment. How could such a person be saved by exalted personalities like the Vishnudutas? Then the Yamadutas start to quote scriptures, as when you're challenged in terms of your skills, he will quote the authority. So when a lawyer is challenged, he will quote the law of the land. Then depending on the crime, then there is a different kind of law that you quote, civil, criminal, all of that. In the same way, in every field you have the authorities, and they have a set of books which are being considered as a standard, and then you start quoting from that. Here, the Yamadutas, although externally not looking very good, but they are trained by one of the Mahajans who is Yamaraj himself. So, they are quoting Vedas, they are quoting religious principles, they know Lord Narayan is the supreme cause, how there are different witnesses for the actions done by the living entities in this material world. The potency of Yamaraj himself, how he acts in cooperation and under the guidance of the Lord in the form of Supersoul. Then the power of modes of material nature, the three modes and the effect of the modes producing peaceful, then restless and foolish people corresponding to the goodness, passion and ignorance respectively. How the current actions of a living being determines the next body. And that's where today's verse, Prabhupada goes into details about the transmigration. The framework that gets used here is, many frameworks are getting used. One of them is the three modes, goodness, passion, ignorance. Then the framework of time in terms of past, present and future. Then we are analyzing a person in the mode of ignorance through past, present, future. Then the next framework is the knowledge which drives the worker to do a particular action. Then he has a particular type of understanding, then his intelligence is taking him through to a particular path, and then there is a result. This is another framework that is being utilized. They're all coming from Bhagavad Gita, the last 6 chapters. This gives a graphic picture of the intensity of the entanglement. Having described how the living entity is bound, then the solution is given. What is the solution described in the purport? Yes, so the solution is described in terms of surrendering to spiritual master. Then what happens? He gives Vedic knowledge, engages the disciple in the process according to the psychophysical nature of the disciple. Then the ignorance is removed, as we see the word Janma Smriti. He is able to see himself, like, why am I here? Why did I get a particular type of body? What's the consequence of my current action and how is it going to affect the future? So he is given that Shastra Chakshu. And based on that, his destination will also change in the future. When he sees, acts as per the spiritual master, where does he go? So the impact of ignorance, that's the first point I wanted to discuss based on what Prabhupada said in this particular purport. As we saw, the framework of a person in the mode of ignorance, then on that we are applying past, present and future. Now, a person in the mode of ignorance does not know why he is situated in this particular type of body in the present moment. He does not know what he did in the past to get this particular type of body. And in the present, he is continuing his sinful actions without knowing the suffering that he is going to go through in the future. So in the current life, Prabhupada says he does not hesitate to perform sinful activities. So an action means there must be a motivation. Factors that motivate action are knowledge, object of knowledge, and the knower. So the motive here for a person in the mode of ignorance who is suffering in the present life is sense gratification, and in the present life he is engaged in sinful activities. Why? Because his knowledge is in the mode of ignorance, completely unaware of self-realization. If you're not aware of self-realization, forget about God realization. So, although it is said as knowledge, that knowledge is under the mode of ignorance, these persons could be materially very, very expert. If somebody can take that phone and leave it outside, that'll be good. Probably it's Preeti Lakshana Mataji's phone, not sure. Yeah, knowledge in the mode of ignorance is completely, it's a kind of a misnomer in one sense, like it's knowledge in the mode of ignorance. So you're covered about the spiritual side and you are only aware of the material side. And you think you are intelligent, you're smart, and you perform activities and you don't see spirit, soul at all. Work is what is important. To get the work done, I can do anything. So there is no spiritual knowledge at all. This many of you can relate to your workplace as to how some of them might be very good at getting the task done by hook or crook, and they are focused. They don't see people, they see only work, projects, timeline, budget. People, nah. Work has to be done. For that, they will put themselves to a lot of hardship and they will not hesitate to put others into hardship. They are simply interested in their present body, and the consciousness is compared to that of the level of an animal. Focusing only on the happiness, that happiness derived, as Prabhupada says, animals derive happiness by eating as much as possible. So a person whose knowledge is in the mode of ignorance does not see people, sees only work, thinks that his body is all in all. If he is proceeding in this way, Prabhupada warns that his future is very, very dark. So this is the impact of ignorance of how a person sees the world, how he acts. So if knowledge is in the mode of ignorance, that's how the worker will work, and that's how his actions will be. And his understanding will be based on that knowledge, and his motivation and his intelligence will be driven by that knowledge. As a result, he may get some temporary happiness, but in the long run, as Krishna describes, the result is he is blind to self-realization. He doesn't spend time for self-realization at all because he is fully engaged in material activities. So this is how we we are introducing the third framework of knowledge, then the action, the worker, the intelligence, buddhi, as Krishna describes, then dhriti, determination, and the result is happiness. Because we are Satchitananda, as Gangeshwar Prabhu was saying yesterday, these three, Satchitananda, they are tightly linked. So a worker must be alive and conscious, and if you're conscious, you will be active and you're always seeking happiness. So this is how we see the person in the mode of ignorance is motivated by sense gratification, and his happiness is totally blind to self-realization. Then forget about realizing God. In the purport, Prabhupada contrasts a person in the mode of ignorance with a person in the mode of goodness. So what's the example Prabhupada gives for the person in the mode of goodness? So the Brahmanas are given as an example for those in the mode of goodness. So that introduces another framework of how the society is divided based on the modes. Because modes are acting, and then within the society, how do you see that application is through the Varnashrama system, through Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishyas and the Shudras. So, if the knowledge of the Brahmana, who is acting in the mode of goodness, he is able to see living beings as individual souls and they are part and parcel of Krishna, although the externals are different. That is why in the Gita we have the famous verse, Brahmana looking at different living beings. Do you know that verse? Yeah. What does the Pandita see? What are the living beings he sees? He sees a Chandala, okay. Human beings, scholar. Yeah, what else he sees? He sees a dog, dog eater, then elephant. So you might recollect that picture. So the externals are different. In the same picture you will see soul and super soul next to each other, and the Brahmana is seeing, Pandita is seeing. He sees undivided spirit in all beings, although situated in many forms. So this is the vision of a person in the mode of goodness. Equipped with this vision, he can understand, why am I in this present body? The plus and minus, the advantage, disadvantage of my current body is due to my pious or impious activities in the previous life. That's why I got here. So he has the understanding of the past life based on what he has got, because the body, which is considered as the dress for the soul, we have a dress, a dynamic dress, which changes dynamically, grows and goes through changes. So we can say that this dynamic dress, at one stage we need to give it up and we have to take another one. So the Brahmana is aware of that. Why he is in the present body, and he is aware of the past. And Prabhupada says, he is aware of how to get out of the clutches of Maya. He is aware of that also. Next point Prabhupada mentions is, he takes guidance from the Vedic literature, and through that he is equipped with the Shastra Chakshus. He is able to see the world through that vision. And as a result, he becomes detached from the modes. And because Vedas and Vedanta Sutra and Bhagavad Gita especially gives the knowledge of the three doers. And it also gives knowledge of how the jiva is bound. The subject matters in the Vedic knowledge discusses about Ishvara, the supreme controller, then the living beings who are part and parcel of the Lord, and then the material nature. Material nature is the Daivihi Yesha Gunamayi. So that Gunamayi Maya, she has got the three modes. And acting as per the modes. So one is able to see that the modes are acting and he is slowly getting detached. He is getting detached from the false ego. A Brahmana is clear in his understanding of what is to be done and what is not to be done. So here we are talking about, in real life, you see people at work who get projects done, but they are also concerned about how they are getting it done. They don't just see the work, they see people who are doing the work and how much the work is they are producing is impacting the society, how much good they are doing to the society, and they try to minimize the bad impact, because every action will have some resultant reaction. There will be some bad reaction, but they'll try to minimize. So that's why in workplaces you will see this principle of avoiding the use of paper so much. They say if this email or this doesn't need to be printed, it's good. Avoid printing so that has an impact on the environment, because the more paper we use, the more trees need to be cut. So at workplace, these kind of measures are being introduced so that they have a broader vision. They're not just getting the work done, but they're seeing the impact of their work on Mother Earth, impact of their work on fellow human beings, on the country. So it broadens. So such a worker who is equipped in the mode of goodness, his determination is strong and he has enthusiasm. That's a steady enthusiasm despite facing success or failure. So initially when a person takes to the mode of goodness, Krishna describes it is poison in the beginning. Yattad agre visham eva pariname amrutopamam tat sukham satvikam prottam atma buddhi prasadajam. So if you want to make the switch to from the mode of passion or ignorance to goodness, it will be poison in the beginning. Visham eva. But the end result is amritopamam. It awakens one to self-realization. So that's the mode of goodness, how it creates a good platform for a person to take up the next level of going to the mode of pure goodness. Prabhupada explains that goodness is not always pure in the material world. There is always a contamination of passion and ignorance. So, as we know, there is a constant competition among the modes. So, goodness is not always safe, so one has to transcend, as Prabhupada writes in today's purport also, that one can come out of the modes by taking to the goodness and pure goodness. Now the next theme or the vision through which we will see the current purport is the role of the living being, the material nature and the super soul in arranging a body for a particular jiva. So the role of jiva, prakriti and Paramatma in getting a particular material body. So this section from the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna describes in detail, because that section Prabhupada says that if you want to understand the transmigration of a living being, one has to read those key set of verses from the 13th chapter, from 21 onwards, where it gives cause and effect analysis. Cause and effect analysis. Cause and effect analysis basically it describes and presents how things happen, why things happen, and who is playing what role. So that's why Krishna will describe that in Vedanta Sutra it is presented as to cause and effect. So this verse itself will begin, who is the cause of what? Nature is said to be the cause of all material cause and effect, whereas the living entity is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. So this clearly tells who's responsible for what, and what is the role of each one of them. We're discussing about nature, jiva and Paramatma, and the role of them in producing different bodies. So the role of material nature, if you want to understand, say if you're going to a grocery shop, you buy different items, you put them, and then when checkout, you're given a bag, and in the bag you collect all of the items. So the role of material nature is like that of creating the body which is like a bag, and this dynamic bag grows, as we saw, takes birth, grows, and material nature arranges the body according to what you desire. And then she does a nice packaging, puts the living entity in the bag, and this sum total, as Prabhupada says, is offered. The sum total of the body and the instrument and the senses, the yantra, is given to you by the material nature. Yeah. So you see earth, water, fire, air, ether inside us, and then there is earth, water, fire, air, ether outside us. So she creates the outside environment and she also gives us the body. The external environment also, as described by Krishna, is temporary and full of misery. If the external ingredients are full of misery and it is temporary, when we are deriving a body from that, you expect the same. Body is also going to be temporary and full of misery. Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. The environment outside us is like that, and the body that we have got, that also is temporary and full of miseries. Now what does the jiva do in this? What's the role of the living being? Prabhupada writes, according to one's desires and activities. So that's what the jiva does. It desires and engages in activities. To enjoy the material nature, you desire, and then the nature gives you the particular residential quarter, as Prabhupada says. It places you in a residential quarters, which is the body. So jiva is capable of desiring, he wants to act on those desires, and he wants to experience happiness. The aim is happiness, whether we get it or not, that's a different thing, but the aim is happiness. So to execute the desires, you need a proper instrument, and that is what is given by the material nature. So the role of jiva is that he wants to lord over the material nature, and he is getting attached to that enjoyment, as Prabhupada describes elsewhere in the probably in the 15th chapter, one of the purports, as to how, as you're getting attached to material nature, you will give up the service to the Lord. And the moment you give up service to the Lord, you get more entangled, and your propensity to lord over the material nature increases further. So desire is a subtle cause, which we may not see, and then karma is the actual gross or direct cause. Prabhupada writes, it might be more clear to state that this body is the effect of the senses. And the senses are the instruments for gratifying desire. So desire is the subtle cause and karma is the, you see, the effect. So that's why the cause and effect is there, the direct cause. Now what does the super soul do in all of this? Where does the super soul come into the picture? Super soul observes and sanctions, upadrishta anumanta. Although the living entity thinks he is the enjoyer, he is just cooperator. If you see, take the example of drinking water. Okay, so Krishna says he is the taste of water. The organs are given to us by the material nature, and we are just cooperating in the enjoyment between the Lord and His energy. So we are not the actual enjoyers, although we think we are. Because what we are looking for, the taste, that is Krishna, and the ability for us to enjoy that, the sense organs, that's also given by the material nature. So the Lord is enjoying His energy and we are cooperating. This is the actual scenario, but the living being thinks that he is the enjoyer. So the super soul will sanction. So you desire, you perform activities, and then there is a sanction of the super soul. Now, with this past, present and future, what the super soul does is, when the living entity gets a new body, super soul gives you forgetfulness of what you did in the past. So imagine if we had to carry the burden of memory of what all lifetimes we had and the sufferings we went through, we may not be able to function properly in this present body. So that's why super soul gives you forgetfulness of the previous life. But the crucial point is, he was witnessing you when you were doing those activities in the past life. He was a witness, along with the witnesses that we saw in the previous verses. He was one of the witnesses. And he accompanies you in this life by giving you forgetfulness of your past life. At the same time, he gives you remembrance of where do you start off and perform or continue your activities here in this body. The example given is that of young puppies of the dog. They naturally go towards the mother to get milk. Like, who is giving that knowledge? The puppies didn't go to school. Who is sitting inside and giving that knowledge? Who is directing? That is the super soul. That remembrance gives, in this present life, how do I start acting? That is given by the super soul. And from the current life, Paramatma gives intelligence, knowledge and remembrance. That's how in 15:15, Prabhupada puts it in the purport as to the role of Paramatma in the jiva, getting a new body and starting actions in the present life. He was a witness in the past. He gives you forgetfulness of the past. In the present, he gives you remembrance of where do you start off. He gives you intelligence, knowledge and remembrance. Under this guidance, the living entity starts to, so he's got a new body, is given by the material nature, Paramatma is guiding, so then he starts to associate more with the material nature. So this is how the union between the Prakriti and the false Purusha, the Jiva, is happening. And thereby, verse 22 of 13th chapter tells that the living entity is responsible and therefore he meets with good and evil among various species. This is the depth of entanglement of the living entity, the various causes, the effect of it, and how much the modes affect in entangling a living being. Having seen how the bond is created between the jiva and the material nature, we will look at who breaks the bond. That's where the role of spiritual master is there. So Prabhupada writes a lot of instructive statements in this purport and also in the 13th chapter. His sense of urgency is seen when he writes that one has to rise, therefore, above the three material modes and become situated in the transcendental position. So that change, Prabhupada says, can be affected only by hearing from authoritative sources. So there is a sense of urgency is there in the purport. One has to be situated, unless you're situated in this body, in Krishna consciousness, unless you're situated in Krishna consciousness, you'll be obliged to act according to the nature or swabhava of the body. And Prabhupada says this nature can be changed. He gives a hope that by listening from authoritative sources, this fall down of the jiva, as we saw, tendency to lord over material nature, you give up the Lord service, then the propensity to lord over material nature increases, you become more attached, that fall down will reverse. It is possible to rise above. The beginning is hearing from authoritative sources. And that's how we transition to the next theme of the role of spiritual master, the importance of spiritual master in breaking the bond between the Prakriti and the Jiva and creating a bond between the Jiva, Paramatma and Bhagavan. So, what is the role of the spiritual master? That's what we will look at based on Prabhupada's purports in the last 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. As laid down before us, we are seeing the role of the Jiva, the Prakriti and the Supersoul. Getting the basics right, that's what the spiritual master does. He gives the vision. Let's get the basics right. Before you start building a big building, you will have to have a strong foundation. So spiritual master begins with setting the basics right. He distinguishes, he gives you the ability to distinguish between matter and spirit, and that Prabhupada says becomes the stepping stone for spiritual realization. As we saw earlier, a person in the mode of knowledge, in the mode of ignorance, does not see spirit. As we saw, he is getting work done. Slowly we are able to distinguish between matter and spirit because the spiritual master is intervening. Then he gives various instructions. By that instructions, your spiritual position is clear. Yeah. We don't just stop by, the spiritual master doesn't stop by saying you're not the body. He also gives the understanding you're part and parcel of the Lord, you're a servant of the Lord. So the instructions of the spiritual master is so potent that Prabhupada writes that it cuts through the hard knots of the material nature. Because of that Purusha Prakriti union is a hard knot, and the spiritual master cuts the knot. As we see in the 15th chapter, the sword of knowledge, Krishna urges that one has to cut through the sword of knowledge. It's interesting to note that knowledge is given by Krishna, but the strength to lift the sword and to cut, that is given by Lord Balaram. Jnanasim Achyuta Bala. To take the sword and to cut the hard knot, that strength is given by Lord Balaram. And therefore, Guru, representing Lord Balaram, gives us the strength for us to cut the hard knot. Now, the instructions Prabhupada says of the spiritual master will also give one strength to follow the process. He says that the strength to follow the regulative principles comes from the obedience to the instructions. The regulative principles will become easy for you to follow if you get the blessings of the spiritual master. So that's why this verse is being quoted. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. So Prabhupada writes in the 13.8 to 12, because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciples, the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. So you get the strength and you get the blessings. The process becomes easier if you get the blessings of the spiritual master. So if we look at the examples of those in the mode of ignorance who got the blessings and who got transformed, can anyone quote any examples of those in the mode of ignorance who got the blessings of the spiritual master and who got transformed? Sorry? Jagai Madai, very good. Yes, Jagai Madai were delivered by none other than Lord Nityananda, then Ratnakar. Hunter, yes. Is that same as Mrigari, or Mrigari is different? Mrigari, the hunter, was also saved by who? Narad Muni. So if you see their vision, they don't see living beings. Hunting, we don't care. Living beings or not, we just hunt. Work is important. Living beings, we don't. So that's the knowledge. So they're blind to self-realization. Here comes the spiritual master. He intervenes and brings up the consciousness of such persons who are entangled by the mode of ignorance, and by the power of the spiritual master's instructions, those who are oblivious to what body I'm going to get in the future, how much I'm going to suffer in the future, how much sinful activities I'm doing in the present, they don't know any of that. And the body of a hunter itself is a result of their past sinful reactions. So they don't know about that also. But here comes the spiritual master, Narad Muni. He changes the whole, their life by giving the wisdom from the Vedic knowledge to the level that he is able to access. Did Ratnakar become Valmiki, or is that, I'm not sure. Because, is that? Yeah, okay. So you can see the transformation from the point of not seeing the soul, forget about seeing Bhagavan. that same person gets transformed who cannot even chant the holy name. The holy name has to be given in a reverse order, Mara. He chants Mara, 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 Marama, that becomes Rama. And then by continuously chanting, he gets transformed. His consciousness, his work, all of that gets transformed. And then he is able to write the entire Ramayana. Now another example of the one in the mode of ignorance who got transformed is Prajapati Daksha, who was momentarily overcome by pride and all of that. He gets transformed after the intervention of Lord Shiva. How he gets corrected. Later his heart is transformed. Then he comes out. And then he continues this service to the Lord by creating progeny. Now, any examples of those in the mode of passion who got transformed? The prostitute liberated, the prostitute who got transformed by Haridas Thakur. Okay, that's a good example. Combination of both, She was ignorant of Haridas Thakur's position and she wanted money, that's why they get into that profession, so wanting money is passion, but that's a good example, Things that I thought of was Dhruva Maharaj himself, as we saw in the earlier canto. Fourth canto, Dhruva Maharaj, we see that, as he himself says, that his desire was to acquire a kingdom greater than Lord Brahma. Then he is checked whether his determination is strong. Narad Muni intervenes there as well. Then how the transformation happens? By hearing to the authoritative sources, following the process which is tailor-made for them at that particular point. Because in the forest, Dhruva Maharaj cannot make a deity out of a metal, so Narad Muni made adjustments, make a deity out of wood, gave the mantra, and then Dhruva Maharaj followed. Then got transformed. Then when he saw the Lord, actually his all desires were gone. I don't want the kingdom. I was looking for broken pieces of glasses, but I am seeing you. I am grateful to my spiritual master. Kacham vichinvan api divya ratnam. So another example from Bhagavatam which came to my mind about those in the mode of passion getting transformed is King Prachinabarhi, who was engaged in a lot of animal sacrifice with the desire of promoting himself to heavenly planets. Then Narad Muni gives a graphical picture through the Puranjana analogy. Then this is what you did in the past, this is what you're doing in the present, in future, this is how you will end up. So then he goes through that transformation, his knowledge, action, intelligence, everything gets changed and he gets a better understanding. So, thus we saw the transformation, the power of the spiritual master, how he is able to take the living entity out of the deep entanglement of the material nature through the modes, and how he is able to elevate them wherever they are, from mode of goodness or below to the mode of pure goodness. And this, when the principle of elevation, when we want to have some practical application of how to elevate, as Prabhupada says that those in the mode of ignorance are like animals who are attached to food. So even those who are attached to food can be elevated by giving them prasad. As Prabhupada writes in the 3.11 purport, by performance of yajna, one's eatable becomes sanctified. He quotes the Shastra, Ahara shuddho sattva shuddhi, sattva shuddho dhruva smriti, smriti lambe sarva granthinam vipra mokshaha. So here in the word-to-word meaning we see that nashta janma smriti, you have lost the memory, and here the memory can be reversed. How? By eating food stuff which is offered to the Lord. Ahara shuddho sattva shuddhi. So when eating becomes sanctified, when food stuff becomes sanctified, one's very existence is purified. Then what happens? What's the cause and effect? The purification of existence, you get finer tissues in the memory become sanctified. The result of that, when memory is sanctified, one can think of the path of liberation. And finally Prabhupada says, and all these combined together lead one to Krishna consciousness. So this is at the level of you applying it to yourself and extending to others. And Prabhupada says, this is the greatest necessity of present day society. And that's why we see the food distribution happening to address even those who are unfortunately caught in the mode of ignorance, for them to purify their existence, to get the finer memory tissues, and then coming back to the path of liberation. So that's the potency of the power of bhakti and the instructions of the spiritual master, who is able to, as Gangesha Prabhu said, by the guidance of the super soul, Srila Prabhupada knows what to give, how much to give, when to give, to who, different persons in the mode of different modes, and still elevate them. Now, another personal application point for going to the mode of goodness, as given in 11.13.2 purport. When you are situated in a time, especially not just in the 13th chapter of 11th canto, other chapters as well, Krishna describes that there is items to be sanctified, the time, the place, the mantra. He gives a whole list, which all can be sanctified by offering it to him and using it in his service. So when there is a time period for the mode of goodness, when you perform religious activities at the right time, when the mode of goodness is prominent, what that does is it gives you the strength, you get invigorated, so that you get the strength to do more activities in the mode of goodness. So that's how the modes will give you it will create the environment for you, the field. Now what you do in that depends on individual choice. One has to make that right choice, and once you keep on doing a particular activity, that is what is going to come up more prominently each time you want to do other activities also. So if you are able to utilize that time when the mode of goodness is prominent and do religious activities at that time, so the later part of the day also, this strength will help you to overcome the other modes. This is how the process which is given by the spiritual master, each one of us individually applies and also extends to this society, so that, as Prabhupada writes, especially in this age, human society is covered by the mode of ignorance, and therefore everyone thinks his present body to be everything. So, by personally applying, strengthening oneself and extending it to the society, one can create a great impact. Not all of them in the society will take up. Prabhupada gives an encouragement. Even if a small portion within the society takes it up, even if you are able to make them as brahmanas, then that is successful. So that gives an inspiration for those who are out and distributing books and giving out prasad. So you see that impacts the society and that pleases Srila Prabhupada, and by his blessings we will be able to get out of the 3 modes and attain pure goodness. I'll leave it there and see if there are any questions on what we discussed. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Thank you for your class, Prabhu.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, what have we done in the past to have got the human form? Because I haven't read anything about it, really.
What have we done in the past to get a human form? So my understanding is there is a progression from being in the water, Jalajana Valakshani, Stavara, then you become plants, Kramayo Rudrasankyaka, then animals, and then when you come up to persons in the mode of goodness, their previous life could be a cow. Persons in the mode of passion, previous life could be a lion. Ignorance could be a monkey. So, and then you come to the human form, you're awarded. So, animals don't incur karma, but there is a progression, and then you're given. From human form, you can choose to go up or down. But what you can analyze is your present bodily situation in terms of health, your position in terms of finances, like how wealthy you are currently, and the parents that you're born to. All of that is the effect of your past.
I think I heard Prabhupada said most devotees wouldn't have been an animal in the past life. They would have been probably a human.
Yeah, so Krishna does describe that if you leave your if you're not able to perfect your devotional life, then you'll take birth among the aristocratic family or the rich or among devotees. So yeah, you're right. Anyone wants to add to that? Or?
I was thinking more about even this cycle of Varnashram Dharma.
So, Varnashram Dharma in relation to the connection to previous life.
Yeah, progressive.
Okay. Yeah.
So, traditionally is that you elevate yourself to different ashrams and human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, human beings can take a Varnashram and they have that choice to make. And then if they don't, then yes.
There's 2 points. One is regarding this topic. So when in Gita, when Krishna says swapamapyasya dharmasya, that means you do a little bit of advancement that will save you from the greatest type of danger. Yeah. That means the human birth is guaranteed in the next life. So I'm just wondering, the transition to human life could be from a past human life or from a demigod body as well.
Yeah.
Or from a lower species as well.
Yes, so that's a point where you could have, there's a whole sequence about how you fall from the heaven to, from heaven to the rain to grain, from the grain gets eaten by a man, and then man impregnates a woman, like that. There's a whole sequence. So you don't necessarily have to come from bottom up, as Mataji said, it could be from, fall down from the heaven also.
Prabhu, I have a question. In Narad Muni's story, in a past life, he was the son of a maid servant.
Yeah.
And then is that an example of ignorance as well? I'm wondering.
Narad Muni's previous life as son of a maidservant.
Making the transition from ignorance to...
Yes. So he eats the remnants of the Mahabhagavats who come, and his mother serves them, and he also serves them, gets the permission. And yes, so that's also an example.
So in that story, actually, I was just curious to know, does he hear from them because, like what we understand through different other sources from Bhagavatam, the spiritual master gives us the sword of knowledge, and then we cut the bonding.
Yeah.
Whether Narad Muni actually heard from them, or whether he just ate the remnants and got advanced.
I have to read the section again, but based on what I've heard is, he also, when they were discussing philosophy, he was also there and hearing from them. I don't know the exact references, but he heard from them, he ate the remnants, and he served them. So he was, of course, when there is hearing, there will be doubts, he would have asked questions. But what is more elaborated is how much dedication he showed in following the process. So he became detached and took a blessings. The passing away of his mother, he took it as a blessing, and then he was fixed up in executing the process. Of course, he got the blessings from the Mahabhagavats, and I need to read that section to find out if he actually heard. But what I've heard other devotees speaking on this section, they said he took part in the discussion also. So,
we understand that the circumstance that his upbringing was favorable as well, to take birth from a woman that was dedicated to the service of sadhus. And also it said that the son inherited the qualities of the mother as well. So the lady was an ordinary sutra or main servant. She has some qualities.
Yeah.
And besides, we understand that we have a mixture of the modes of nature in us.
Yeah.
We cannot say yes, ignorance, it's a mixture of them.
Yeah. Yes, the birth in the son of a maidservant, could be a result of his. But that small, good quality in that maidservant to serve the Mahabhagavats, that propensity, and as you said, he inherited that. He followed his mother, who's acting like a Vartama Pradakshaka Guru, engaging him in service of the Mahabhagavats, and then that tinge is there, and then the spark from there he took off. So,
Prabhu, just one last quick point. Those who are illiterate, they don't understand the philosophy, but they're at the same time not exempted from going back to Godhead. So for them, could you just talk about that? They would have to, I guess, serve the spiritual master.
Yeah, okay. So your question is about how will illiterates go back to Godhead without reading Shastra. Okay. We have the example from Chaitanya Charitamrita itself about how the Brahmana illiterate was trying to execute the order of his spiritual master. That endeavor, in one sense, that fact that you are illiterate, you will not have such kind of a strong philosophical doubts about doubting the supremacy of the Lord. That fact, you have that drawback, could be used as your strength. You won't have strong philosophical doubts. You will be easily attached to the personal beauty, the pastimes, and the nature of the Lord. So that's what happened with the Brahmana, who couldn't read Bhagavad Gita regularly, but he saw the picture of how the Lord is acting as a chariot driver for Arjuna. Then he got attached to the Lord, and that attachment is the actual conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita. So Mahaprabhu says, you know the conclusions of the Gita. So as said in this particular purport, Prabhupada says, the blessings of the spiritual master will help one follow the regulative principles. It will make it easy for a disciple to follow if he gets the blessings of the spiritual master. So the point is, even illiterates can become enlightened, and when Lord decides to give them knowledge, then that doesn't stand in the way.
So I was also considering that being illiterate doesn't mean you don't have knowledge, because
You can't read.
we receive knowledge by hearing.
Yeah.
For that I don't need to read,
Yeah.
but proper attention. So I think we have the case of
Gaura Krishna, yes,
Babaji, pure devotee and illiterate. But
Yeah.
So I have another question. It's regarding, I was analyzing these stages of getting knowledge and being covered by the modes of nature, ignorance, sometimes in different periods of our life, even by practicing, while we're practicing Krishna consciousness. It's no guarantee that we will remain in one state of consciousness. I receive knowledge and now, okay, I'll be all the time in goodness. No, I can be covered again and again recover myself. And so in that case, I was analyzing a case of Arjuna. He associated with Krishna, pure devotee, but he was also covered when Krishna started to preaching him Bhagavad Gita. And so at that stage, when he was covered, the mode of ignorance, in the position of Krishna giving knowledge, rising of his consciousness at that time, can be the example that you were asking about.
Oh, yes.
Ignorance.
Yeah, Arjuna himself could be given as an example of a person who's covered by ignorance momentarily, then Krishna being the spiritual master, through giving him knowledge of the paths, of the pros and cons of different paths, and then the easy path, direct is bhakti, then giving him for his varnashram position, this is what you must do. So yeah, we can say that Arjuna got enlightened and moved from ignorance to pure goodness. So, yeah.
So you mentioned that like to transcend the three modes, the blessing of the Guru is very important. But like in practical terms,
So to transcend the modes, the blessing of the Guru is important. Yeah.
like you gave the example of Dhruva Maharaj.
Yeah, you can speak.
Yeah. Prabhu, you mentioned that to transcend the three modes, blessing of Guru is very important. You gave example of Dhruva Maharaj also. My question is more practical, like when you are away from your Guru, when you can't serve him personally, or when you know that they have 25,000 disciples or 50,000 disciples, how can you like get that blessing of Guru, or how can you see that manifestation that you are getting that blessing?
Yeah, even in the example that you gave, it's not that Narad Muni was always next to Dhruva Maharaj and guiding him day to day. He gave the instructions and he moved on. So what Dhruva Maharaj did is, he followed that instructions, and even at that time there was no contact, there was no way he can communicate with Narad Muni again. He was determined to follow the instructions and stick to it, and he intensified his practice based on what he heard. So these principles we can take, then applying it to our situation within ISKCON. The spiritual masters won't be with us physically, but they are with us through the form of their lectures. If you need guidance for a particular life problem, say for example, and you're open to receive that instructions from your spiritual master, but he is not there. With that sincere prayer, you can go through the lectures that he has given on various topics and see the topics that he has spoken on addresses one of your issues. Even if you don't scroll through and analyze it, if you have that strong faith, okay, let me hear from my spiritual master. Any lecture you pick up and hear. Many times it happened to me is that whatever I need to hear and that particular circumstance will come through that lecture, through that purport. So by this, either in this purport or some other purport, Prabhupada said, this is the mystic potency of receiving guidance through disciplic succession. This is mystic. If we explain this to others, they will say, oh, come on, you must be kidding. But we as Bhakti Yogis, we know it happens. So the key principles are that you be open to receive instructions even though they are not physically with you. How do you know they are pleased? Is by looking at what they have said in the lectures. If you are fulfilling it to your best extent, to that extent you are fulfilling them. Then third is to consult with senior God brothers who are ahead of you in spiritual life. Consult them, and so that way you are with them through instructions and by following them. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, as you said that the super soul, it takes out the memory of the previous life, but still in nowadays we see a few people who still remember their previous lives.
Yes.
So, yeah, how is that?
How would you answer when somebody asks you this question? In book distribution or somewhere, what will be your answer?
If somebody asks me the same question, I'm not quite sure, Prabhuji.
You're not quite sure. Okay. So Krishna reserves the right to reveal how much ever he wants to, depending on the living being. Some cases he does give them the remembrance, but in most of the cases he does not. They have a lot of proof of past life memories, experiences as a whole theme there, where it is recorded. Some of them remember. Interestingly, one in Mumbai, one person attending one of the Journey of Self-Discovery course, he said he himself is a case of remembering past life memories. So nobody took him very seriously, but then later His Grace Hari Prabhu spoke to him, found out, and he is from a particular background, but he could speak other languages, which was not his mother tongue. Then they did the whole investigation and found out it was true. So Krishna reserves the right to reveal to some he doesn't. So that's how we understand. He treats everyone differently.
And also, Prabhuji, I had another question that if in the previous life somebody has some connection with devotees, then like if in the next life they remember it, they might
Just keep it close to your mouth.
like if in the previous life they have some connection with the devotee, so if they remember it in the next life, they might practice the bhakti better. So like some people, they don't remember if they were doing bhakti in the previous life.
Now, based on what Krishna said in the Gita, he is putting you in a spiritual family, and he will also give you the remembrance of bhakti, what you have done. Say for example, in past life you have finished 30% or 40%. Krishna says you will start off from where you left, which means the soul remembers that much of advancement it has done. The real example from the Bhagavatam is Bharat Maharaj. He was so advanced, unfortunately he took up the body of a deer, but the bhakti that he did was not lost. So you will take off from where you left. So in the case of children who are in the devotee family, the devotee family gives them a good environment, and then the memories, they come back. And then when you start interacting, the more it will come back, and you will take off from where you left off in the previous life. So the environment is a proof that you have done something good in the past life. The fact that you are born in a devotee family proves that you have done some devotional activity, and you pick up things quickly from where you are. Is that? Okay. We will end here. Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai.